Hey guys, tonight we begin a story not of raids or glory, but of survival, of how the Vikings braved nights so cold, your breath froze mid-prayer, and even the goats tried to sneak into bed. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. And let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I always find it fascinating to see who's joining this sleepy journey worldwide. Now turn off the lights, switch on a soft fan if you enjoy that gentle background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a young Viking. The first true night of winter has arrived, nothing like you imagined. The cold creeps into your fingernails, your eyebrows steam, and then freeze when you exhale. Everything is so quiet, you can hear snow falling on the roof, and your grandfather hissing because someone stole his blanket. You're lying inside the longhouse, a wooden hall shared with your entire clan, livestock, chickens, pigs, and a dog that looks more frozen than you. The ceiling is low, and smoke from the central fire floats lazily like a tired ghost that refuses to rise. You breathe in, like swallowing soot mixed with burnt straw. You're wrapped in a fur cloak your mother calls the forefather's mantle. It looks like a bear died mid-battle, and smells like one too. Every time you turn, it sounds like someone tearing sandpaper in the dark. Your little brother is on your left, kicking you in his sleep as if he's fighting a troll in his dreams. Your grandmother is snoring in sync with the wind howling through the wooden walls on your right. Above your head lies the family cat, perched like a king, its claws flexing every time you move. You've already learned one rule. In a Viking winter, your spot near the fire is your social rank. And you, less lucky, are in the neutral zone, not the coldest, but cold enough to make you curl into your brother despite his sour porridge smell. No one sleeps. They doze, groan, shift, mumble, then drift off again. Your mother tells stories about a man who once survived winter on nothing but an onion and sheer belief. You're not sure which mattered more. Even food tastes different now. Dinner was slightly fermented oat porridge, optimistically called warrior soup. It came with a slice of cheese so hard it might break a tooth. Dessert if your teeth are strong. You eat fast because the slower you go, the colder it gets. And the colder it gets, the more it tastes like salted ice. In the corner, your father feeds the fire. The crackling sounds like ancient whispers. A spark leaps out, nearly singes your uncle's sleeve. No one flinches. A burning shirt is better than no fire at all. Then a fierce gust bursts open the door. A chill sweeps through like Odin is testing you with his winter breath. Everyone groans, the goat bleats in panic, and your grandfather yells, "Close it!" like he's waking the dead. You pull the fur tighter, curling in like a hedgehog. You're not asleep, but you're not fully awake either. You're just surviving. And that's the most significant victory on this first night. In the flickering firelight, you see your mother stroking a newborn baby's hair. The baby sleeps soundly, lips smacking like it's dreaming of porridge without bugs. You wonder how you could sleep like that. Instead, you lie there, listening to the wind, the groans, the snoring, and occasionally the sound of the cat vomiting from rancid butter. And you think, maybe you'll be okay. Maybe tomorrow night will be easier. Perhaps you'll get used to it, or not. But you're a Viking, and Vikings don't quit just because of a cold wind and a bed full of goat hair. The next morning, you wake up feeling stiff. Not stiff like after training or battle, but like a loaf of bread that was baked, forgotten in the snow, then reheated with a stare. You turn your neck and hear a soft crack, unsure if it came from your spine or the fur cloak you had pulled over your face all night. The fire has long since died. The air in the longhouse now thickens with stale smoke, unwashed sweat, and the silence of a family not yet ready to leave their blankets. You try to sit up, only to realize the lower half of your body is being held hostage by the cat. It's draped across your lap, like a clawed ball of fluff, purring like it's dreaming of battle with some mythical mouse. A dim light slips through the wooden slats. You're unsure if it's dawn or just moonlight bouncing off the snow. Outside, the wind still howls, like the earth is furious you dared to survive one more night. Inside the longhouse, people begin to stir. Grandma stretches and drops the entire bundle of firewood she'd been hugging for warmth. Your father sits up, rubs his head, and groans. A sound that in ancient Viking translates to, "Didn't die last night, but it was close." And your little brother, still asleep, mouth open, one leg casually draped across your face. You shove him off and begin the sacred morning ritual, locating a pair of boots that aren't frozen solid, retrieving your cloak from underneath the goat, and checking if any spoons survived last night's blazing feast. Your mother is already up, stirring a pot of oat porridge, or more accurately, a chunk of oat rock that she believes will soften if stirred long enough. You don't have the heart to tell her it's no longer food, it's architecture. The smell of breakfast, if it can be called that, wafts through the house. It makes your stomach growl, but it raises the question of whether eating this is riskier than staying hungry. You eat anyway because you're a Viking, and Vikings don't turn down porridge because it looks like frozen algae jelly. Once the meal is done, it's time for work. Outside, snow falls silently like a curse. Everything is white, thick, and so cold your face might crack if you smile too hard. You cinch your cloak tighter, pull your hood lower, and step outside to complete a vital task: checking if the goats are still alive. The animal shelter is by the forest's edge. It's made of leftovers, broken posts, frayed rope, and a thatched roof that looks ready to fly off with the next gust of wind. You open the door and are instantly hit by a wave of smell: manure, wet straw, and a hint of despair. But the goats are alive. They look at you as if to say, "So, did you bring food or just hugs?" You have neither, so you shrug and rub snow on your legs, a trick your grandfather swears by. The cold gets the blood moving. You haven't seen proof of that, but you feel colder. You gather firewood from the forest's edge, where snow reaches your knees. Every step is a battle, every stick is a treasure. But if you don't bring back enough wood, the family will be heating with optimism. And you've tried thawing your hands with optimism. It doesn't work. When you return, Grandma is telling the children a story. Something about an ice dragon that lives in a deep cave and flies over the village each winter, sucking the warmth from the world. The children are wide-eyed. You think, that dragon better start bringing firewood. You sit by the newly lit fire. Dad tosses in an old wooden axe, muttering that it's too dull for chopping. Might as well burn it. Your mother hands you a cup of warm water, or at least not frozen water, and says, "We made it through the night." You nod. One night, one victory. You look around the longhouse. Grandfather is stitching up a torn sock with goat hair. Grandma is humming. Mother is stirring the pot, and the kids are arguing over who gets to sit closest to the fire. There's laughter, there's smoke, there's a tiny flicker of warmth. But it's real. You exhale. The mist from your breath swirls and disappears into the thick air of winter. And you know, if you woke up this morning, you get another chance to win tonight. You're standing in the middle of the house, holding a leather glove as stiff as rotten wood, trying to figure out which side should go inside. On your head sits a beaver skin hat passed down through 3 owners, and you look less like a warrior and more like someone shoved into a sleeping bag and kicked down a snowy hill. Welcome to Viking winter fashion, where the only goal is not dying, and style is something you hope to worry about, if you survive. Your mother is helping tie yet another rope around your waist, today's 4th layer of fur. She says it has to be tight to hold the heat. You don't have the heart to tell her it's also holding your internal organs hostage. Every exhale is a symphony. Wheezing, fabric rubbing, and a slight gurgle from a stomach slowly compressed into pudding. Your little brother is trying to wear a too long cloak and keeps tripping over it. Grandma chuckles from the corner, saying he looks like an upside-down ferret. No one disagrees. He does. Outside, the snow is falling silently, like flour from the sky. The wind howls like trapped spirits inside a flute. You open the door, and the wind immediately rushes in, as if it wants to assess the quality of your coat. Spoiler: the coat is fine, your face is not so much. You step outside, each footfall giving a satisfying crunch against the brittle snow. Your boots are made of fish skin, specifically the kind of fish that weren't lucky and are extremely slippery. So every incline is a test of patience, gravity, and how forgiving your knees are. Your father is checking the ropes on the roof, wrapped in a coat so massive it could cover 3 people. "From the bear last year," he says. "Or the bear got it from me last year, unclear." You look around and everyone is bundled in something. Some wear wolf pelts, some reindeer hide, and one kid has a scarf made from something toothy. You choose not to ask. In a place where winter drags on for months, clothes aren't just clothes. They're mobile fortresses, wearable blankets, your only defense against a cold that turns your snot into wood glue. But living in fur isn't always cozy. It itches. A lot. You scratch, then scratch again, until you're standing like a bear trying to learn ballet. You're also constantly zapped with static from the fur, your hair standing up like you've been struck by lightning. Grandma says you look electrified, and you're unsure whether to feel flattered or worried. You remember the first time you were given a cloak. Grandma said, "Keep it safe." It belonged to your grandfather before he got rammed by a reindeer in spring. You took that seriously, because while reindeer attacks sound funny, winter without a cloak is not. Inside there's a little drying corner for damp clothes, a forest of dripping cloaks, scarves, socks, and something unidentifiable slowly oozing onto the floor. The air smells thick with mildew and scorched wool, a scent you've accepted as usual. The alternative is the smell of frostbite. At night, you hang your hat near the fire, hoping it won't be stiff as stone in the morning. But one time, you put it too close, and by dawn it was half charred and looked like a curly-haired rat had fallen into the oven. Dad laughed and said, "Lighter now, that's a plus." You're not so sure. Everyone has their own winter armor. Grandma wears a fur coat with an oversized hood covering her eyes. She looks like a walking onion. Dad's fur coat is thick enough to stop a spear. And your little brother still insists on wearing that sleeveless tunic backwards and denies its pants. And you're learning to live inside the suit of a beast. It's heavy, it's hot, it stinks, but it's why you're not a frozen statue with a mustache. And then you think, strangely, in all this cold, itchiness and smoky stink clinging to every inch of you, you start to feel warm, not because the cloak is magical, but because you're not cold alone. Everyone's here, bundled in ridiculous layers, sitting close by the fire, telling stories, giggling, and sometimes dozing off. And you realize something. Winter doesn't defeat the Vikings. It's just a long battle, and the weapons are old blankets, patched coats, and a hat big enough to cover both ears and half your kneecap. Afternoons in a Viking village often began with a serious question. What can we eat tonight that won't kill us? It wasn't rhetorical. It was a survival strategy. Every winter meal was a battle, not against people, but between your stomach and reality. You're sitting around the hearth, trying to stir a pot of something. You're unsure if it's porridge, soup, or a prank from Loki. Your mother calls it groot, a traditional oat porridge, though today it includes turnips, some seaweed, and something that just floated to the top, looking deeply suspicious. Your father sniffs it, frowns, and silently passes the spoon to your grandfather. He takes a taste, exhales like an old warrior accepting fate, and says, "Better than nothing," in the tone of a man delivering prophecy. You bite, and immediately shiver like Thor tapped your tongue with his hammer. In winter, food is not something you get picky about. You eat what's edible, as long as it doesn't look back. Dried fish is the main course. Fish hung from the roof beams since summer, now hard as stone and perfectly usable as a weapon if necessary. To eat it, you either soak it in water or smash it with a hammer. Once, you saw your father use the back of an axe to break a fish, sighing, "Just another normal day." Next to the fish, there's dried meat. Not the fragrant kind. This stuff has been salted to the point you're unsure if it's meat or if you're licking a salted rock. But it fills you up, and full is a victory. There are vegetables too if you manage to dig some up. Turnips, carrots, frozen onions, and sometimes mysterious roots your grandmother calls wild greens, but look suspiciously like decorative twigs. You boil them, you taste them, and you pray they're not hallucinogenic. A few times a week, your mother adds a bit of fermented milk, something she calls yogurt, but you're pretty sure it's passed through 3 stages of life: fresh, sour, and sentient. Still, when mixed into porridge, it adds a flavor indescribable. People call it hearty. Dinner happens around the fire, no table, no chairs. Just a wooden bowl each, a chipped spoon, and vague dreams of bread. Winter bread is a luxury. If you have flour, you make flatbread, so tough it can double as a pot lid. Leftovers are dried and stored to be boiled into bread porridge next week, a cycle with no end. Yet strangely, there's warmth in the roughness. The crackle of fire, the crunch of chewing. Grandma's stories about the feast with actual reindeer meat once upon a time. A tale no one can confirm. Your little brother squints with delight, chomping on fish like it's cake. And then your father reveals a miracle, a drop of honey. Just a tiny bit, but to you it's sweeter than a festival. You dip your spoon in and touch it to your lips. It's the best moment of the week. That soft sweetness, melting into the salty porridge, makes everyone laugh aloud. Even Grandpa chuckles, and he usually only laughs when the wind shifts in his favor. Sometimes the whole household celebrates if someone catches wild game. A rabbit, a grouse, or in one legendary case, a plump beaver. It was not a grand feast, it was just a bigger stew, more food, and slightly louder singing. Turns out a full belly improves your voice. And when there's nothing to eat, you drink water, melted snow, cooled, boiled again, maybe filtered through cloth if you're fancy, or you drink it straight like your father says, Odin never filtered snow. And when dinner ends, people start to settle down by the fire. Empty bowls stacked, spoons scattered, eyes half shut in quiet contentment. Whether it was stone porridge or dried fish, you feel warm. Not because of the food, but because everyone is still here. Together, surviving, eating, waiting for morning. And you whisper like a Viking lullaby, we'll worry about tomorrow's meal later. Tonight, we're alive. After a dinner of stone porridge and warrior-style dried fish, your family begins preparing for the most sacred ritual of the day. Sleep. It sounds simple, but for Vikings, sleeping in winter wasn't an act, but a survival art form, a test of endurance, a communal performance at the highest level, of huddling. You curl up inside a fur so old no one remembers whether it once belonged to a bear, a wolf, or a creature that science has yet to discover. It's heavy, thick, and richly scented with smoke, sweat, and childhood. You tighten it around yourself, fasten it with a hemp rope belt, and slip into the sleeping gap between your father and little brother, a spot known as not the coldest, but the most kicked. The longhouse dims under the soft glow of a dying fire. Smoke rolls lazily through the air like friendly ghosts. Overhead, the thatched roof occasionally drops a bit of frost, like being kissed goodnight with a tiny ice cube. Viking sleeping was a coordinated group dance. No one slept alone. That was taboo. In sub-zero temperatures, a hand's distance width could be the difference between wake up early and don't wake up at all. People slept pressed together, a woven cocoon of humans and fur, like a pile of talking sardines. You can feel your father's body heat radiating like a furnace that snores. On the other side, your brother is already asleep, one arm wrapped around your leg, as if he's afraid you'll turn into a pillow and leave. At the far end, your grandmother hums an old lullaby, her voice thin as smoke, but warm as fire. The more minor children are bundled into thick piles of blankets, only their pink noses sticking out like tiny root vegetables. Your dad lets out a sharp hiss when someone accidentally kicks his toe. There's a ripple of muffled giggles, then silence again. Just the crackle of embers, the soft rhythm of breathing, and occasionally someone talking in their sleep, in Old Norse, about something severe no one understands. There are no pillows. Pillows are a luxury concept. You rest your head on your arm or an old bundle of clothing. The lucky ones use a fur-wrapped log. You once tried using your little brother's belly, but after 3 minutes and one swift kick, you gave up. As for mattresses, a layer of straw was spread over the dirt floor. Sometimes it smells a little moldy, or maybe that's mouse. No one checks. The important thing is, it keeps you off the frozen earth, and that alone is a minor miracle. On the coldest nights, you wear a sleeping hat, long enough to double as a scarf when twisted around. It's believed that keeping your head warm keeps your soul warm. Your mother always says, cold head, bad dreams. Warm head, dreams of bread. You choose bread. Sleep doesn't come quickly. You lie still, eyes open, listening to every sound of the house. The fire was crackling. Someone is snoring in triple time. The wind howling outside like ancient ghosts, complaining someone forgot to shut the door. Then, slowly, you drift off, not into deep, luxurious sleep, but enough to recover, enough to survive another day. And in your dream, you're lying on a spring bed, under a fluffy comforter, head on a feather pillow, and the smell of fresh buns wafting through a window. But then, the village cat jumps on your chest, and you wake up realizing it's still winter, still the longhouse, and your little brother's leg is once again across your face. You sigh, pull your hat down over your ears, and whisper to yourself, "Sleep, Viking. Tomorrow we survive again." The next morning, as a sliver of sunlight slips through the wooden planks, you're awakened by laughter, not from the adults but the children. Your younger cousins, tiny in size but thunderous in volume, shriek like they've just discovered how to cook fish using sunlight. You rub your eyes and crawl out from beneath your fur blanket, which smells like smoke and something else best left unnamed. Outside, the snow still blankets everything, but it doesn't stop Viking children from launching into their favorite winter survival game, joy. You step outside and are immediately greeted by a snowball to the ear. No warning, no reason, just snow, cold, wet, and unapologetic. A grinning Viking kid giggles and vanishes into a snowbank, leaving you standing in the yard with the expression of someone who just wanted to pee. In a Viking village, kids didn't have plastic toys, TV, or video games, but they had snow. And snow was the most fantastic playground in the world. There are no rules or scoreboards, throw, roll, and run when chased. You watch them sledding off the roof with pot lids. One sits on a wooden shield, shouts "Valhalla!" and launches down the hill like a screaming meatball, only to crash into a snow mound and vanish, legs sticking up like carrots in soup. No problem. The kid bounces up as if collisions were part of the fun, brushing snow off his face and grinning with a missing front tooth. Another is building a snow fort, a masterpiece made of 3 snow clumps, 2 sticks, and a chicken guarding it like the winter spirit of chaos. They call themselves Lords of the Snow and Guardians of the Wind, trading dried turnips like royal treasure. Despite being older, you can't resist joining in. Because inside every Viking, no matter how grown, is a kid who secretly wants to throw a snowball at someone's face and not get scolded. You scoop a handful of snow, pack it tightly, and launch a direct hit on your brother's back just as he ties his shoe. He turns, eyes wide, grinning like a goblin. And so begins the war. Shouts echo through the yard, snowballs fly like mini cannonballs. Every throw sparks laughter. Every tumble teaches physics, and even though your hands are numb, your cheeks sting, and your boots are filled with melted ice, no one wants to stop. After the snow fight madness, you and the kids sit lined up on the wooden steps, panting, faces flushed, still laughing. Grandma brings out a steaming pot of warm water with ginger slices. She calls it tea, but it's ancient family soup for frozen fingers. You take a sip. Your throat warms instantly. Your tongue, not so much. The kids go quiet for 2 whole minutes. Then one says, "Let's build a 3-headed snowman this afternoon." Another replies, "Or a goat trap for Grandpa's goat." And somehow both ideas sound dangerously fun. You look out at the snow, endless. Software white, it's no longer the enemy. It's a playground, a companion, a stage for winter comedy starring an all-kid cast. And you realize maybe this is how Vikings endured such brutal winters. Because in children's laughter, the cold always seems just a little less cold. You pull your hat lower, tighten your coat, and rise. This afternoon, you'll build a screaming snowman. You'll fashion a sled from the old table. Or maybe you'll sit and watch them run wild with joy that needs no explanation. And deep inside you, something is growing. Not just resilience, but the quiet truth. No matter how harsh winter gets, it can't freeze laughter. That afternoon, you find your grandfather sitting alone on the porch, surrounded by snow, wearing a tattered fur hat and gripping a wooden spoon like it's the ultimate weapon against winter. The wind whips past him, snow drifts lazily through the air, but he stays there, sipping what might be soup. Or warm spoon-rinse water, no one's sure. You approach, shivering. "Aren't you cold, Grandpa?" He snorts. "Cold? Cold only matters if you still care. These days, all I feel is the wind trying to make conversation." You're unsure what the wind is saying, but you doubt it's polite. Old folks in Viking villages are like lazy prophets. They don't go out much or speak often, but when they do, their words make you think, or laugh, or both. And in winter, they're living vaults of strange little tricks to keep your body and soul from freezing. Grandpa begins to share his survival wisdom in a voice as low and steady as snow sliding off a roof. 1. Never sleep on an empty stomach. According to him, an empty belly loses heat fast, so even if there's only one spoonful of cold porridge, he eats it. Once, he even ate candle wax, thinking it was frozen fat. Didn't taste good, but didn't die either, he says. You write that one down. And also mark it. Only in extreme desperation. 2. Never stand still too long. Cold only catches those who don't move, he says. So he always finds something to do, gathering firewood, checking rope knots, chasing chickens, even though the chickens never actually go anywhere. You realize staying warm isn't just about fire, it's about staying so busy you forget you're cold. 3. The wind isn't your enemy, it's your friend. You eye the wind currently trying to crawl up your pants and doubt this. But Grandpa explains, the wind reminds you you're alive. If you go outside one morning and don't feel the cold, either death's arrived or you're already frozen solid. 4. If you want warmth, laugh. He tells you about when he and a friend got lost hunting in a snowstorm with only a hunk of old cheese and a torn boot. They laughed all night, clapping hands to stay warm and roasting the reindeer that ran away with their jokes, not a fire. Laughter cuts cold better than a fire axe, he says, eyes twinkling. You sit beside him, knees drawn up, tugging your coat tighter. Grandpa, you ask, were you ever afraid of winter? He looks at you, quiet for a moment. The wind whistles again. Snow falls silently. Then he says, of course. But not the cold. I feared silence, a house without voices, no one left to listen to old stories. You go quiet. Then gently rest a hand on his shoulder. Your hand is cold, so is his. But together you sit and look out over the endless white and understand something quietly powerful. The worst winter is being cold, with no one beside you. Grandma appears, holding a fur blanket. You out here dreaming in the wind again? Grandpa mumbles, not at all, and sneaks a grin at you. She drapes the blanket over both of you and mutters, old fool, as she walks inside. You and Grandpa sit a while longer, saying nothing, just chuckling now and then when the wind finds awkward places to tickle. And as the sun dips behind the distant pines, Grandpa pats your head and says, remember this, kid. Winter always comes. But if you know how to laugh, to share, and to keep your heart warm, then even if snow buries the rooftop, you'll never be buried with it. As night falls once again, you sit close to the fire, hands stretched out like you're trying to absorb the very last rays of warmth the day has to offer. Outside, the wind howls, not like mere wind, but like someone moaning through a cracked flute. You shiver, not just from the cold, but because Grandpa begins to tell a story. The north wind, he rumbles, is not just wind. It's the soul of winter, an ancient god, angry, and not too happy about humans building houses too close to his mountains. You roll your eyes. Your little brother immediately pulls the blanket up over his ears. The other kids huddle in, eyes wide. Grandpa goes on. Long ago, there was a young warrior, stubborn, who built his house facing straight into the wind. Every night his fire went out, his wood was soaked, and his soup froze in the bowl. Grandpa lowers his voice, eyes narrowing. And then one morning, they all found a trail of footprints in the snow and a pair of pants. Everyone goes silent. You glance at your pants and quietly tighten your belt. But don't get him wrong. The north wind isn't always the villain. To Vikings, it's an enemy, but also an old acquaintance, a returning challenger. Every year it comes back, clawing at the wooden walls, whistling through every crack, snuffing out oil lamps and making the whole village shiver. But it also stirs something profound. It's a reminder that you're alive. You remember the first time the north wind slapped you across the face. You were 6, ran outside without a hat because you thought it made you look cool. 5 minutes later, your ears were beet red, tears streaming down your cheeks, and you were sprinting around the house like a chicken on fire. Grandpa sipped his tea under the porch and said, "Welcome, winter warrior." People in the village have all kinds of wind tricks, stuffing moss in their sleeves, rubbing seal fat on their noses. Grandma swears by dried eucalyptus leaves tucked inside your tunic to confuse the wind. You tried it. The wind wasn't confused. But the cat avoided you for a whole week. Others sing. On the loudest nights, the whole village gathers in the longhouse, the fire crackling, and they sing. Not because they're happy, but they believe that no dark spirits can come close if human voices rise above the wind. It may be true, or it's just a good excuse to sing badly and not be judged. Then comes another story, one so old no one knows if it's true or a tall tale. About a girl named Freydis who stepped out into the snowstorm, stared straight into the north wind and said, "You can freeze my face, but don't you dare touch my hair." You ask, "And then what?" Grandpa answers solemn as ever. Since that day, she's worn braids on both sides because the wind doesn't dare mess it up anymore. The whole house bursts into laughter. The wind still howls outside, but inside it feels warmer now. You glance at the fire, now fading to embers. You know the night will be cold again. The wind will roar, the door might rattle, and someone at some point will cry out, "It's freezing," just like every night. But you also know the wind can't beat someone who knows how to laugh, can't scare someone with family by their side, can't sweep away someone wrapped in 3 layers of fur and cradled by grandma's lullaby. You curl into your coat, pull the hood up to your chin and close your eyes. Outside, the wind growls like a guard dog. But you've learned the lesson of the night. The wind can howl, the wind can bite. But if your heart is warm enough, winter is just a noisy guest. You wake up to a strange sound. Not the crow of a rooster, not grandma's soft cough or grandpa's creaky morning groan. But silence. A thick, muffled silence, like the whole world outside has been blanketed in cotton. You push yourself upright. The house is darker than usual. The hearth is nearly out, just a few glowing embers blinking like sleepy cat eyes. You peel back your fur blanket, yawn loudly, and hear your little brother whisper, "Blizzard." The whole house seems to pause. No one screams, no one panics, because Vikings don't fear blizzards like people fear ghosts. They fear them like you'd fear a grumpy old neighbor showing up uninvited. Your father steps to the door, gently lifts the windblock panel for a peek, and is immediately blasted in the face by a wall of snow like someone flung flour at him. He slams it shut and nods. Yep, real blizzard. A Nordic blizzard isn't the kind of snow you see in paintings. It's a howling white tempest that rips away anything not tied down, ices over rooftops, and makes chickens question their life choices. It arrives unannounced, screams for hours, sometimes days, and if you're not ready, it will scatter you like dry leaves in the mouth of a storm god. You and your brother jump into your routine, stuffing cloth into door cracks, plugging gaps in the walls with dirt, piling firewood into a central heap. Grandma checks the heavier pillow wraps. Mom stirs a thick batch of gluey porridge, saying, "Nothing beats the cold like food that sticks to your ribs." Everyone knows their role. No one leaves the house. Even the cat goes to bed early. In a blizzard, Vikings don't fight nature. They shrink inward, like a stone in the wind. And they wait, but not in silence. Your father brings out the lyre, an old, nicked thing missing a string, but still able to sing notes as sweet and sharp as snowflakes tapping the roof. Your mother begins to hum an old lullaby, the words lost to time, but everyone knows it's meant to put the snow god to sleep. Her voice is soft as fleece, and everyone seems to breathe a little easier. The kids gather in a corner, telling Viking ghost stories about white figures wandering the drifts, warriors lost to storms who turned into talking oak trees. Whenever one shouts, "And then he turned and stared right at you," the whole group squeals and laughs. You sit beside Grandpa, who's sharpening a small knife. Not for use, just out of habit. He says, "In a blizzard, don't try to be stronger than the wind. Be smaller, be still, wait, it'll leave." You ask, "How long does it take?" He shrugs. "Depends on its mood." Outside, the wind howls like it's arguing with the sky. You can feel the house tremble. But strangely, you don't feel afraid. There's a peace in knowing that everyone's here, doing the same thing. Enduring, quietly resisting, and occasionally laughing. Grandma hands you a small wooden cup. "Caraway root broth," she says. You sip. It's hot, a little sweet, and vaguely tastes like soil, but your body warms instantly, and that's enough. The family gathers in a circle around the hearth, which crackles back to life. No one talks much anymore. All sound feels like the snow is swallowing it. The fire snaps. Someone yawns. A little one drifts off to sleep. Outside, the storm rages on, but inside it feels like you're tucked into a nest, a warm cocoon, a fortress made of fur, laughter, and old stories. You close your eyes. You can still hear the wind roaring, but in your heart, only one thought remains. The storm will pass, but family stays. You wake in the middle of the night, not from the cold, not from the wind, but maybe because your little brother, once again dreaming he's a warrior, has delivered a thunderous kick to your back, like a bolt from the gods. You sit up, pulling your fur blanket closer, wrapping it tight as you glance around the longhouse. It's pitch black. The hearth has nearly gone out, just a few red embers glowing faintly like the sleepy eyes of a dragon. The wind still howls outside, raking across the thatched roof, a haunting, groaning sound, like the house is trying to speak an ancient tongue. You shuffle quietly toward the fire, gently nudging the coals, careful not to wake the cat curled up in the onion basket. It opens one eye at you as if to say, "That last bit of warmth is mine, and I'm watching you." You sit, hands outstretched to the dim heat. It stings, too cold to warm, too warm to ignore. Then suddenly a familiar creak behind you, and a voice, soft and gravelly. "Can't sleep, huh, kid?" It's Grandpa. Somehow, no matter how old he gets, he always appears when you need him, or when someone is about to poke the fire wrong. He sits beside you, pulling his cloak tighter around his shoulders. The two of you haven't spoken for a while. You listen to the faint hiss of the embers, the growling wind, and someone murmuring in their sleep, "Don't take my bread." Then Grandpa starts to speak. No warning, no introduction. Just begins, like the story had been sitting in the coals, waiting for flame. Long ago, when snow was whiter than now, and the wind hadn't learned to howl, only to whisper, there lived a man named Eirik, deep in the forest. Every winter he never lit a fire, never burned wood. He simply sat and listened. You frown. Wasn't he cold? Cold, Grandpa nods. But he believed that if you listened long enough, the wind would speak. And if the wind spoke, then he wasn't alone anymore. You glance at him. And did it? Grandpa smiles, eyes reflecting the ember light. One night it did. Not with words, but with images. Visions, memories that weren't his, ancient battles, lost ships, eyes meeting through the fog, and when the sun rose, his hair had turned white. You blink. From fear? No, Grandpa says. From knowing too much. You both laugh softly. Outside, the wind picks up, as if protesting its secrets being shared. Grandpa continues, "After that, Villagers would go to Eirik's house when storms came, not for shelter, but to sit. He didn't speak, but anyone near him would dream strange dreams, of places they'd never seen, as if the wind was using him, like a pipe, like a story funnel. You shiver, not from cold, but something else. I wonder. The fire flickers across Grandpa's lined face, casting him in a glow that feels older than time. Do you think it's true? You ask. He shrugs. Who knows? But every time I sit by the fire and the wind howls like that, I feel something shift inside, not fear, respect. The wind isn't just air, it's the memory of the earth. You nod. Without knowing why, you describe your dream from earlier that night. A ship, adrift on frozen seas. A figure in a wolf fur cloak at the bow, a horn made of bone in their hand, eyes shining like cold stars. Grandpa listens, doesn't interrupt, just places a hand gently on your shoulder. You sit there together, two shadows in the glow of the coals. Not sleeping, not cold, saying little. Outside, the wind still rages, but inside, there's a story, there's warmth, there's memory, being shaped gently, quietly, so that one day you can pass it on to someone else. The next morning, you wake with your hair stuck to your forehead and your hands so cold you must pat your cheeks to ensure you're still alive. Your mother hands you something. It smells a little strong, vaguely round, and the temperature is gloomy. What's this? You ask warily. She smiles. Riverstone, boiled. Tuck it in. Keeps you warm till noon. You stare at the boiled rock for a long moment, unsure whether to put it in your coat pocket or throw it out the window. But you try. And surprisingly, it works. Smells like scorched dirt mixed with dried fish. But it works. Vikings had all sorts of tricks to fight the cold. Not scientific, rarely logical, but often strangely compelling. And sometimes, if we're honest, it's only worth trying when you've genuinely run out of options. 1. Stuffing hay into boots. Sounds like a joke, but it's real. Not for fashion, though it screams minimalist farm chic, but because hay retains heat. It's cheap, smells like nature, and fills holes in worn shoes. Just don't overdo it. Otherwise, you'll walk like someone smuggling squirrels in their socks. 2. Moss on the forehead. Grandma swears it preserves forehead warmth, claiming a cold forehead leads to dreams of wolves. You tried it once. And yes, you dreamt of a wolf. Specifically, one ripping your boots in half. 3. Onion skin tea. Weird? Yes. Viking? Extremely. Your mum insists it warms the gut and chases out the wind. You're unsure about the wind part, but after one mug, you were sweating like you'd chased a deer around the village. The triple layer method, fur on the outside, rough cloth in the middle, and dried grass inside. It's less fashion, more medieval, inhumane torture. If you hear a constant crinkle with every step, the grass protects you from the white death. 5. Sleeping nose to nose, not for conversation, for survival. Vikings slept like stacked dumplings, noses together, breath mingling like an ancient central heating system. Just hope no one forgot to brush their teeth. 6. Beeswax earplugs. Your father tried it once. The result? The entire household spent an afternoon removing wax from his hair. Still, he proudly claimed, at least my ears were warm. No one argued. He still had wax in his beard. 7. Dancing around the fire, invented initially to warm the body and burn off children's leftover energy. But if you get too enthusiastic, you might kick the soup pot. No one in the village forgets the great porridge splash of last winter. You realize that staying warm isn't just survival in a place where winter lasts longer than your memory. It's tradition. It's a family legacy of oddball solutions passed down like heirlooms. You remember what Grandpa once said, smart ones wear coats, skilled ones build fires. But the ones who survive, they are the ones who can laugh in the cold. And somehow that starts to feel true. Because under every itchy fur wrap, behind every cup of moss tea, and through every night filled with thunderous snores, you're not just enduring, You're learning how to survive, not just with your body, but with your spirit. Because cold makes the body shrink. But laughter, silly traditions, and quiet love between people, they make your heart grow, like a fire rekindled after the longest night. You're chopping firewood by the hearth, hands numb, cheeks flushed from the wind, when your eyes land on a girl sitting by the window, mending a tunic with flax thread. She doesn't look at you, but in that moment, you swear your blood warmed by at least 3 degrees. Welcome to Winter Romance Viking Edition, where love is more complicated than drying fish in a storm. First of all, winter is not the ideal season for flirtation. Everyone's wearing 3 layers of fur, and every step makes you sound like a walking snack pouch. Want to confess your feelings? Better shout, everyone's ears are wrapped. Want to hold hands? Please remove your glove faster than if frostbite sprints. And don't forget, her mother is always 2 steps away, spoon in hand. And her grandmother, half asleep near the fire, eyes closed, but ears sharp as an owl. You remember that afternoon? You brought extra firewood to her house, a totally random gesture, even though you'd circled 3 hills and accidentally walked into a horse stable. When you arrived, she smiled. You smiled back. A fleeting moment, but enough to make your fur-lined chest feel like it was smoldering. You stopped not from the cold, but because her grandmother looked at you like she was measuring you for a coffin lid. Love in Viking winter comes with no poetry, serenades, or flowers. The flowers are dead, all of them. But there are glances. Some handshakes linger. There are smiles exchanged through the fireplace smoke. The village is small, people are few. If 2 people even think about each other, the entire settlement knows. Is something going on? Next market day, at least 3 older women will hint at it, 2 children will sing about it, and a chicken will crow suspiciously at the wrong time. Some afternoons, you walk beside her by the frozen stream. No words, just snow crunching beneath your boots. Sometimes you stretch your hand out, nearly brushing hers, and pull it back. Because you can't tell if the cold or the nerves make your fingers shake more. Then comes the midwinter festival. Everyone gathers, singing, drinking mead, dancing in circles. You pretend to dance a little closer. She pretends not to notice, but you know. She knows. And probably so do the 3 elders sitting in the corner, pretending to nap. You quietly pass her a still warm ember wrapped in cloth. You say nothing, but her eyes tell you it might as well have been spring itself. One warm gesture is worth more than a dragon's hoard in a frozen world. But Viking love isn't just emotion. It's a promise. It's a test. It's how well you carry water buckets. Her mother asks how much wood you've stored, how many hides you own, and whether you can mend socks. You stammer. Her little sister giggles from behind a curtain. Love in winter doesn't rush. It smolders, like a fire slowly fed. But when it burns long. Some couples fall in love all winter without a single word spoken. Come spring, when the thaw begins, they're seen gathering roots together. And that's how the village knows. And you? You haven't said anything yet, but you've made a new pair of gloves, stitched from goat wool, lined with the softest dry grass you could find. You'll give them to her in the morning when the first snow melts. No words, no poem, just a pair of gloves, and a look that says, if your hands are cold, mine are ready to warm them. Winter in the Norse lands doesn't just test your courage or cold resistance, it also pushes the boundaries of your bladder to divine limits. You know the feeling, you're wrapped up snugly in layers of fur, surrounded by the warm breath of humans, cats, goats, and just a hint of smoke. When the urge hits, sudden, relentless, unforgiving, you open your eyes. The night is pitch black. Outside, the wind howls like a war god, angry that he forgot his scarf. And inside you, the debate begins. Go, or don't go. Freeze, or soak the bedding. Welcome to the unspoken agony few historical texts dare describe, because everyone tried to forget. Vikings didn't have indoor bathrooms. All essential functions had to be performed outside, in the wind, in the snow, in the dark. Some called it a spiritual pilgrimage. Others, a test of mental and muscular endurance. You slip from the blankets like a warrior sneaking off the battlefield. Each step is a symphony of bone cracks, snow crunches, and internal screams of, "Please don't wake up." Your boots are so cold you suspect they've imported a slice of the Arctic into each sole. You open the door and the wind smacks you like Thor's open hand. Your eyes water, not from emotion. Your corneas are freezing. You creep along the side of the house toward the designated family latrine, shared with 3 goats and a judgmental chicken. It's a low ring of stones for wind cover and a stick to help you stay upright. No one lingers there long. The ancestral wisdom is clear. Breathe shallow. Move fast. Never look down. You follow this advice with military precision, until a gust hits sideways, and suddenly you're dancing in the blizzard, dodging snow, gripping for balance and praying. This is no longer relief. This is performance art under siege. Just as you think you've conquered it, you realize your hands no longer feel like hands. You shake, fumble with your belt, and sprint back to the longhouse like a man chased by wolves. You don't recall closing the door. You only remember the divine sensation of diving back under the fur, like returning from the land of the dead. Some have suggested a solution, small jars tucked under the bed. But aroma is not your friend when you live in a longhouse with 14 people, 3 cats, and sub-zero indoor temperatures. A few village elders use special winter jars, usually made from horn or old pottery. They work, but only if you remember to empty them. Otherwise, you live in regret and stink for a week. You still remember last winter when your cousin forgot his boots and ran barefoot into the snow, only to return with his foot frozen to his masterpiece. Since then, the village calls him Fogfoot, a nickname that never melts. So you've learned to manage winter liquids like an art. No drinking after supper, avoid watery soup, and most importantly, always go early. Never wait for emergency level, because in a place where the air can freeze your thoughts, even something as basic as relieving yourself becomes a battle between man and nature. You bury yourself in furs, exhale in relief, and whisper to the darkness, "If I survive till morning, I'm digging a latrine closer." Then sleep takes you, warm, safe, triumphant, until your little brother whispers, "Hey, I need to pee." After hauling your little brother back inside just in time, before the snow could freeze the ties on his tunic, you collapse beside the fire. That's when your father pulls a mysterious object from beneath the blankets. A small clay flask, sealed with a wooden cork, radiating a sweet and dangerously strong scent. You recognize it instantly. Fermented honey, known by its sacred name, mead. Not the kind for fun, the kind you drink to survive a freezing night, with your spirit intact. Your father gently shakes the flask and pours a bit into a wooden bowl with more strange contents than you'd care to guess. "Drink up," he says, "warm the belly, warm the dreams." You bring it to your lips. The golden liquid is thick, fragrant, and hot. Not in temperature, but in effect. It slides down your throat like a drunken snake, then bursts up your nose like you just inhaled baked beeswax with a hint of ginger. You cough, hard. Everyone laughs. Grandpa mutters, "If you don't cough the first time, you're not a Viking." Then he takes a swig, eyes fluttering shut, and starts singing. No one in the house is surprised. When Grandpa drinks mead, one of 3 things invariably happens. 1. He sings an ancient song with absolutely no explicit lyrics. 2. He tells the story of fighting a beaver when he was 27. 3. He falls asleep in his soup. Tonight is option 1. His song echoes through the longhouse, raspy, off-key, but full of heart. It's about a drunken man who wandered into the forest at night, talked to a tree, and accidentally married a rock. Your mother insists it's a love legend. You suspect it's a confession. By the end of the first song, the whole house feels different. Everyone's smiling softly. The fire feels warmer. And the cold outside, it starts to feel like someone else's problem. You realize then, mead isn't just a drink. It symbolizes togetherness, celebration, and the need to do something, say something, share something on these long, endless nights. Grandma lifts the bowl. Everyone parts like the sea. She takes a sip and grunts, too weak. Your father stammers, but I mixed it just right. She glares. In my youth, I drank this and climbed a tree in a blizzard. The house erupts in laughter. The kids, banned from tasting, sit in a corner pretending. One drapes a blanket over his shoulders like a royal cape, holds up a spoon like a scepter and declares, I am king of the attic realm. No one stops him. Mead makes adults a little more forgiving than usual. A neighbor drops by, carrying his mead flask. Nobody asks why he's there. He's handed a bowl, slapped on the back, and welcomed with a grin. In winter, anyone who brings mead is family. You look around, firelight, singing, the scent of burning wood, wet wool, and the glint of eyes catching warmth in the dark. You understand now, Vikings didn't survive winter on fur coats and dried fish alone. They made it through with joy, even if it came in small, sweet sips. Later that night, as you lie down again, cheeks still flushed, chest oddly glowing, you hear Grandpa whisper, in the harshest cold, only two things never freeze, family and good mead. You laugh. Then fall asleep, dreaming that you too married a singing rock. Maybe the mead passed something on after all. The next morning, you wake up in a position that disagrees with your neck. Your arms numb, your back is stiff, and your little brother has kicked your pillow straight into the fireplace sometime after midnight. You sit up, groaning, and slowly slip your feet into boots that are still damp and cold, welcoming a brand new day. There's no such thing as sleeping in during a Viking winter. If you don't rise early, the fire dies out, the kindling runs low, and your backside freezes so bad you'd swear the snow god himself was punishing you. Your mother's been up for hours. She's stirring a pot of thick porridge that smells vaguely like boiled moss. You don't ask what's in it. She looks over at you and smiles. Sleep any longer and your guts'll freeze. You nod. It's hard to argue with logic that's both concise and terrifying. Winter is not the season for laziness. There's a to-do list longer than a beaver hunting spear. And every task matters if you want your family to avoid becoming one big ice sculpture. You start by collecting clean snow to melt into water. Not all snow is created equal. There are three categories. 1. White, fluffy, untouched snow, drinkable. 2. Snow with chicken tracks is usable for washing or wiping tables. 3. Snow with human footprints plus something suspicious, avoid and pick another spot. You bring in the snow, drop it into the iron pot, and start the slow melt. While waiting, it's time to split wood. But cold logs are as hard as stone, and your axe is a little dull. Every swing comes with a quiet prayer. Please don't bounce back into my face. Next, you smash the river stones you brought in a few days ago into smaller pieces. These will be heated and placed around the house to keep warmth circulating. Also handy for warming Grandma's feet. You accidentally sat on a hot one once and were nicknamed Burnt Butt Boy for a full season. Then comes the patching. Snow finds its way through even the tiniest crack in the wall, so you're handed a thick paste of wool scraps, mud and straw. It smells like fermented summer, but it works. Your home now looks like it's wrapped in porridge, but it's cozy. Grandma always says, in winter, the ones who do nothing are the first to feel the cold. That line got you up early 3 days in a row. On the 4th, you tried sleeping in, and she shoved a snowball down the back of your tunic. You've never needed an alarm clock since. There's more. You have to care for the animals. The village goats are not gentle creatures. They glare, they scream, and they're masters of standing precisely where you're about to step. Each morning, you scatter straw, clean up their mess, and, most importantly, scratch the herd leader in the right spot, or you'll get a headbutt just because. Another vital job, breaking ice off the water trough. If you don't, it floods, freezes, climbs the roof, and drops on someone's head while they're daydreaming about toasted bread. And just like that, the dream was shattered by ice. None of these chores is grand, but you realize the small, steady movements, the daily rhythm, keep the house alive. You're not fighting winter with swords. You're fighting it with an axe, a ladle, a scrub brush, bare hands, and sometimes a sigh mixed with laughter. And by noon, when it's all done, you sit by the window with a warm bowl of porridge in hand, cheeks flushed, watching the snow continue to fall, and it doesn't scare you like it did the day before. You've made peace with the wind, the frost, the awkward clumsiness of trying to eat with gloved hands. You quietly realize something. In the coldest places, it's the quiet, repeated acts, day after day, that keep you warm the longest. Evening falls. The snow is lighter now, the wind still biting but gentler, and you're strolling with a wooden basket tied with flax cord, heading toward the stone house at the edge of the village, home of the communal Viking bread oven. This oven belongs to no one and everyone. It's a treasured resource, a gathering place, a fire-lit oasis in the sea of white. As you draw near, the scent of rising dough, hot ash, and slightly burnt crust fills the air, a symphony for the souls of Viking gods with hearty appetites. You push open the thick wooden door and step inside, instantly wrapped in warmth like Grandma's old blanket, without the faint smell of dried fish. Inside, a woman is fanning the flames, her forehead beaded with sweat, cheeks flushed like roasted winter radishes. A man uses a wooden spoon to draw swirls into dough on a tray, while a group of kids sit cross-legged in the corner, staring at the oven like it might birth a loaf that talks. You set your basket down and pull out 2 misshapen lumps of dough kneaded that morning. Imperfect, slightly lopsided, one marked faintly with a heart thanks to your little sibling's enthusiastic flour stamping. The baker lady glances at them, then smiles. A crooked heart's still a heart. All right, in they go. The Viking oven is a rounded stone chamber, fired since dawn to hold heat all day. You've learned to lift the lid, spread the ashes evenly, and place your tray inside like you're offering your hopes to the gluten gods. While the bread bakes, you sit on the long bench near the hearth. Heat brushes your face, your cheeks sweat, your nose turns rosy, and your fingers flex without crackling like frozen twigs for the first time in days. This isn't just a place to bake bread. It's where news is exchanged, stories told, rumors whispered. The baker starts recounting how old Haldor once singed his beard, leaning too close to check his crust. A kid pipes up, and Miss Sigrid made a whole loaf from moss flour instead of rye. Everyone bursts out laughing, though no one's sure if it's a memory or a dream someone had. Some bring dried roots to warm, others lean wooden chopsticks against the hearth to stop them from warping. An older man is airing out socks overhead like a king drying scrolls. You're not sure if it's hygienic, but here everyone silently agrees. The oven is sacred, warm and forgiving. The baker turns to you again. Know why we bake bread in the dead of winter, you think? Because no one wants to eat snow? She laughs, her shoulders shaking, because the smell of bread is the only thing that reminds people of spring. Even when the forests are buried in white, that warm golden scent says, there'll be flowers, there'll be birds, there'll be a day when we won't wear 3 layers of fur. You sit still, letting her words settle. Images of spring flicker in your mind, vague, far off, but as real as wood smoke. The soft crackling of the baking bread rises like a lullaby. Through the oven's mouth, you watch the dough swell, edges turning golden, a smell wafting up like the first proper food after a week of watery porridge. When it's ready, you carefully lift the loaves, nestling them into the cloth inside your basket. The baker pats your shoulder. Take them home, eat them warm, and don't forget to share. You nod, stepping out of the stone house, the warm bread cradled in your arms. Heat seeps through the cloth like the gentle breath of a loyal flame. Snow still falls, but something in you has thawed. You walk home thinking, some winter days are brutal. But with one warm loaf, and someone to share it with, the cold doesn't feel so fearsome. You've just returned from the bread oven, the warmth of the wooden basket still seeping through the thick cloth. The longhouse opens before you like a familiar embrace. Inside, the fire crackles gently. The scent of fresh bread mingles with burning wood, old wool, and the unmistakable presence of your family, a strange blend you never thought you'd find. Comforting. You begin to share the bread. Cutting careful slices with a wooden knife, you pass them to your grandfather, grandmother, and younger sibling, keeping just a tiny piece for yourself. Everyone receives their slice with both hands, as if holding a bit of early spring. Your sibling takes a bite, and their face lights up like they've discovered treasure. Your grandfather nods slowly and says, "The bread is soft." But what matters most is that the hands that gave it were warm. That line settles quietly in your heart. Because in a place where the cold can steal the feeling from your fingers, a warm touch from someone is worth more than gold. In the dead of winter, the Vikings didn't rely only on fire, fur, porridge, or bread to stay warm. They had another secret, something quiet and strange. They told stories. Not heroic sagas or grand battles, but little tales. Silly ones, strange ones. Moments that made people laugh or smile, and in doing so, sparked a fire deeper than any hearth. Your grandmother starts one. Long ago, an old couple lived in a cabin deep in the woods. One winter, all they had left was a single onion, a torn sock, and a cat named Warm. Why was the cat named Warm? Your sibling asks. Because it always sat exactly where someone was about to sit. Grandma answers without blinking. The whole family bursts out laughing. Grandpa nods sagely. That cat was smart. Next, it's your mother's turn. She says she once dropped a pot of porridge into a basket of unwashed wool. The whole family had to eat wool porridge for 3 days, and after that, your father's beard started growing unusually fast. Your brother's eyes widen. "Is that true, Mom?" She shrugs. Who knows? Maybe. And you realize something strange. When people laugh, the air warms up. Eyes shine brighter. Cheeks flush pink. The cold is temporarily pushed back, locked out beyond the wooden walls. You decide to tell a story of your own. The time you went sliding on ice for the first time, got too confident, and slid straight into the chicken coop. 2 scrapes, 3 broken eggs, and 1 chicken that hates you ever since. The kids laugh so hard they fall over. Grandpa nods, dead serious. That chicken holds a grudge. Each story feels like tossing another log onto the fire inside your chest. The tiniest memories, smoky kitchens, scrapes and bruises, colds and coughs, a lingering glance, an unfinished mitten, all gather together in the warm longhouse like old friends coming in from the storm. So that night, no one slept early. No one complains about the cold. Everyone stays close, not to warm their hands by the fire, but to warm their hearts with memories that have outlived the frost. And when you finally lie down to sleep, wrapped in thick furs still smelling faintly of smoke, you think, keeping the body warm is hard, but warming the heart, sometimes all it takes is a laugh and someone beside you to hear it.
The next morning you wake up, but it's still dark. You rub your eyes and glance toward the window, only to find a deep gray like cold ash. There's no sunrise, no golden light slipping through wooden slats, no warm glow you once dreamed of from lullabies. Everything is just dark, and still dark. You quietly sit up, wrapping your fur cloak around you like a cocoon, and shuffle into the longhouse. Your mother is kindling the fire. Your grandfather nods sleepily beside the glowing coals. The hearth burns low and steady, but its light can't push back the thick shadows clinging to the room's corners like a heavy wool blanket pulled over the sky. That's when you remember. In Viking lands, winter isn't just cold. It's long, very long, and dark. So very dark. There are days when the sun barely peeks above the horizon before deciding, like a tired older man, that it's not worth the trouble and goes back to bed. On days like that, the village lives by the light of memory and imagination. Your father reaches for the oil lamp on the shelf, a small flame fed by seal fat or fish oil, casting a glow no wider than an upside-down bowl. But it's enough. In the dark, Vikings learn to minimize light and maximize warmth. You learn to listen to your mother's footsteps crunching on the frozen yard, the soft crackle of the fire, the steady drip of melting snow off the roof like spring rain that lost its way. You learn to smell the scent of burning wood, of soup simmering, of your father's cloak that's hung too long by the hearth, of yesterday's bread still lingering in the folds of a cloth. And you learn to feel. When someone places a hand on your shoulder, lightly, gently, in the dark, that touch feels like a full embrace. At first, the darkness frightened you, especially at the far end of the longhouse where the cat's eyes glowed like spirits and your grandmother sat still as stone. But in time, you got used to it. Then you grew to like it, and eventually you understood. Darkness isn't the enemy. It's just the background that makes everything else stand out. Your grandfather once said, "When you can't see, you listen better. When you can't see the road, you walk slower. But if you know you're in the dark, you'll never be lost." On the darkest days, the whole family gathers around the hearth. Grandma weaves, mother sews. You carve wooden spoons. Your father sharpens the axe by feel, running his fingertips gently along the edge. Everything moves slowly, as if the world has slowed down enough not to leave anyone behind. When night falls, or instead, it becomes darker than usual, everyone sits together around the oil lamp. You light a candle too, a rare luxury for special nights, and everyone stares at its tiny flame as if watching their private sun. Your grandmother tells how, in the old days, when there were no lamps, people told stories in the dark, face to face, guided only by voices. When you can't see someone's face, she says, you hear their heart more clearly. And that's when you understand. Vikings didn't defeat the darkness by trying to light up the whole world. They won by drawing closer together. You lean your head against your sibling's shoulder, listening to quiet stories, the rumbling purr of the cat, the soft clinking of a spoon stirring broth. The whole world shrinks to the span of an arm's reach, a flickering flame, and a whispered tale. And then you drift off to sleep. In the dark, but with a heart glowing bright as the stars. You wake up because something is pressing on your stomach. Not heavy, not painful, but definitely warm. You open your eyes. It's the village cat. What's its name? No one knows. Some call it Ashback because it sleeps so close to the hearth its fur is always dusted with soot. Others call it Rumble because it can purr loudly enough to be heard from 3 houses away. But most of the time, it doesn't need a name because clearly it's the only one in the house without a single care in the world. It's curled up there, like a tiny bearded fireball, breathing steadily, its slight nose twitching, and its claws gently kneading your tunic. Because you dared to move too much. You stay still. Because if you push it off, it will return to your face. Cats in Viking homes aren't like today's pampered pets. They don't have beds. They aren't constantly cuddled, but they are an essential part of winter. They keep the grain stores mouse-free. They warm your feet when you think frostbite's about to claim your toes. They are small, furry gods with whiskers and absolute authority. Your grandmother says, a cat only sleeps on the lucky. You're not sure if that's a blessing or just gravitational tyranny, but you accept it, because when it's lying on you, the cold disappears. All that's left is a mild tingling sensation in your lower stomach. Some nights, the cat curls up between 3 children, all shifting to make space like a royal guest from Odin's palace.
Once your grandfather was telling a story when the cat strolled across his face, tail held high like a victory banner, and sat squarely on his knee. Everyone fell silent. Because when a cat claims a spot, humans are just rearrangeable furniture. You once tried to pick it up to change your sleeping position. Mistake. It returned 3 minutes later, gave you a look like you'd just burned Thor's beard, and sat in the same place, this time with claws. Every time the cold deepens, the cat finds the weakest person in the house and lies on them. Not out of pity, but because they're usually the quietest and least likely to push back. A Viking survival strategy at its finest. Mutually beneficial, but mainly for the cat. Your father once said, if the cat doesn't sleep on someone's head all night, that person's getting sick by morning. No one's tested it, but everyone makes room for the cat. And on tired winter afternoons, when the chores are done, your hands are raw, and your eyelids are heavy, you'll see it approach quietly, leap into your lap, spin in a lazy circle, and flop down like the entire world was built to be its cushion. You don't push it off, you don't cough, you don't even breathe too hard. Because in that moment, as you sit still, stroking soft and faintly smoky fur, a strange peace settles over you. The cat says nothing. It just lies there, like part of the fire, like a small warm breath in the middle of winter. And that night when you sleep, it's still there, unmoving. Through the northern wind, the thick snow, the biting cold, you realize something sweet and straightforward. Sometimes, to survive the winter, you only need a bowl of soup, a dry pair of socks, and a cat who knows exactly where to lie. That morning, you woke up to something strange in the air. Not the scent of wood smoke, not the smell of fish porridge, but laughter. A lot of it, echoing across the village. It was as if the snow had melted and someone was handing out free bread. You rubbed your eyes, stepped onto the porch, and saw something no one expected in the coldest month of the year. People gathering. Fur hats, wool blankets, leather boots. One hand holding bread, the other an axe, just in case, not for use. And right in the village square, a bonfire blazing tall, like Odin's sacred tree set alight. It was the day the Viking village called Jólablot, the midwinter festival. A time to honor the gods, celebrate survival, and drink enough mead to forget that tomorrow they still had to chop wood. You were dragged outside by your neighbor, whose hands were ice, but his eyes were on fire. Come on. They're doing shield sledding. Your jaw dropped. Real shields? Yeah. But this time, if you can't slide farther than Gudrun's grandma's chicken, you don't get any salted fish. You quietly prayed that the chicken was feeling lazy today. The festival had every sort of game only a Viking could invent. A contest to see who could chew dried fish the longest without water. Winners were usually those who'd lost their taste buds the winter before. A challenge to toss onions into the chief's feathered helmet. No one knew the rules. But if you knocked the helmet off, you'd be on dish duty all week. And of course, sledding down ice hills on pot lids. You watched older men, young kids, and one elderly aunt line up with wooden ladles as steering paddles. A shout rang out, and they launched down the hill, spinning, screaming, laughing like they were riding wolves while eating hot soup. You didn't join, but you laughed until your face hurt. Then came the ancient ritual, the elders lighting the sacred log and singing the old songs. Their voices were raspy, off-tempo, but something about them sent shivers down your spine like the ancestors were listening in. Your father stood beside you, hand on your shoulder. Remember, he said, we light the fire not just for warmth, but to remind ourselves we're still alive. You watched the flames rise, dancing in the eyes of familiar faces. Kids ran in circles on the snow. The village cat leapt through gaps like a circus performer. Your grandmother shouted for someone to bring her mead. With steady hands, not like last year. Everyone laughed, and in that moment you understood the actual reason for a midwinter festival. Not to celebrate that winter is nearly over, but to remind each other we're still here, together, and we can still laugh. You went home that night with a full belly, flour on your hands and smoke in your hair. As you lay down, you chuckled to yourself. On the longest night of the year, you didn't feel alone. And as you blew out the candle, you thought, if the cold is a test, then laughter is how Vikings cheat. After the wild night of the festival, you expected to wake the next morning to music, to laughter. But no. You woke up because of a smell that was hard to describe. Pungent, savory, almost like boiled dog fur. And yet, somehow, it smelled like home. You opened your eyes, pulled the blanket off your face, and the scent hit you full force. From the hearth, from the black iron pot hanging above the fire, from your grandmother's hands as she stirred it with a wooden spoon the length of your leg. You crept closer and peered into the pot. Soup. The legendary winter soup. It had no real name, no specific recipe. It was only ever referred to by one sacred title. This. Lunch is this today, said your mother. We had this last night. Your father nodded. We'll reheat this tomorrow, your grandmother grinned. What's in this? No one ever really knows. Each bowl tastes a little different. One day slightly sour, another day faintly rich. One time mysteriously like dill, though no one in the house has dill. The ingredients shift, depending on what's left. A trembling piece of turnip was rescued from the basket's bottom. bits of dried fish still clinging to the twine. No one's sure whether a handful of wild mushrooms are edible or dreamy. A scoop of yesterday's porridge, reborn. And bone broth, the one thing that holds it all together, both culinarily and spiritually. You picked up a spoon and took a bite. Salty, savory, hot, something crunchy, hopefully a root, something spicy, perhaps Grandma's peppery fingers. But in that spoonful, you felt a bit of your family's warmth melted into the broth. Grandfather ate silently, as if in solemn ritual. Your little sibling blew into each spoonful, eyes watering from the heat. Your father said, "This tastes better when eaten close together." No one disagreed, and it was true. The pot bubbled gently, steam blurred the window panes. The longhouse felt smaller and cozier. You didn't need anything else, just a wooden spoon and steady hands. You remembered something your grandmother once told you. There was once a poor man who ate thin soup every day, but he lived longer than anyone in the village. Because each time he ate, he invited someone to share it. Soup wasn't just a meal, soup was an invitation. When you eat soup, you're inviting someone to sit down, to pause, to stop worrying, to stop shivering. Just sit, breathe, and warm up, from the inside out. You took another spoonful and found a root shaped like a heart. You looked at your grandmother, she winked, you smiled. Then you heard your mother say, "We'll bring some soup to Astrid's house later. Her husband's come down with something." And your father nodded, "Bring bread and firewood." And you realized winter would never be easy, but people could make it easier, with a pot of soup, a loaf of bread, and a warm hand reaching out. That afternoon, you walked through the snow beside your mother, carrying the pot to the neighbor's house. Neither of you said much, just walked, holding warmth in your hands and feeling lighter inside. And you thought, if there was one thing that helped Vikings survive the winter, it wasn't the sword or the shield. It was the spoon and a pot of soup that remembered everything. You returned from Astrid's house into a thick, silvery afternoon. The wind wasn't fierce, the snow fell softly, like chalk dust shaken from the sky. And the sun didn't set or rise, it simply blurred, like a memory you can't quite name. The village faded into a soft grey light, gentle as cooled ashes. People moved more slowly, spoke softer, and you realized this winter was no longer an enemy. It had become the rhythm of life. In summer, the Vikings were busy, chopping wood, hunting, rowing, fighting, building, and trading. But when winter came, everything stopped. No one told you what to do. But you also weren't allowed to do anything, because winter wasn't for sleeping. It was for thinking. You sat by the fire, arms resting on your knees, watching the red flame lick into the wood. Every spark was a whisper. Every pop and crackle was the heartbeat of the house. Your grandmother was sewing a rip in the old blanket. No one rushed her. No one counted her stitches. But you knew, with every thread, she was mending another winter inside her. Your father was sharpening an axe. There were no trees to fell this season. But he said, "Not because I'll use it, but because my hands shouldn't forget the feeling." You understood. Keeping warm wasn't just a matter of flesh. It was about staying grounded. You quietly picked up your wooden knife and started carving a new spoon. No rush. The wood was cold, hard, but fragrant. With every stroke, you smelled pine. You didn't need to finish. You only needed to keep going. Your little sibling was arranging dry beans into the shape of a ship, then scattering them, then starting over. No one teased. Because in winter, every quiet game is a form of survival, and every quiet survival is its kind of warmth. Your grandfather did nothing. Just sat, eyes closed, head gently nodding. But you knew he was listening, not to what was outside, but to what was within. He once told you, "When there's nothing left to hear, listen to yourself." So you tried. And inside your mind came sounds you thought forgotten. Grandma's murmured stories, laughter from the festival, the clink of spoons stirring soup, the cat's soft steps on wood, the hiss of fire flaring as someone adds a log. No fanfare, no brilliant light, No loud declarations. Just stillness, to remind you that you are alive. For Vikings, winter wasn't a time to rise. It was a time to steep yourself in silence, to look at your hands, rough but still able to move. Feel your heart slow, steady, like a lullaby from the snow god himself. You sat there a long time, not thinking about what needed doing, not worrying about tomorrow, just sitting, breathing, warming. And when the whole night finally came, you stood up, removed the carving knife, and brushed away the shavings. The spoon wasn't finished. But you didn't mind, because you knew winter wasn't over and you still had plenty of time to keep quietly living. That night you sat beside your grandmother. In her lap was a ball of yarn bigger than the village cat, being drawn out, strand by strand, as if she were pulling threads of time to weave into something that would last. She was knitting a sweater, and not the kind you make for fun. This was serious knitting, where every stitch was a construction, every loop a thread of care. And if you asked, when will it be done? She'd look at you like you'd insulted the ancestors. You sat and watched. Her hands moved rhythmically. Wooden needles clicked like whispers. That sound was as familiar as the fire crackling or the wind brushing the roof, an inseparable part of Viking winters. You asked quietly, "Who's it for?" She didn't look at you, just smiled. For the one who always sits closest to the fire. Their backs starting to smell like smoke. You blushed. That was you. And no one had ever made you anything before, not beyond a few sewn-up rips after you fell into that bramble bush last year. Knitting wasn't just about making clothes. It was a memory. She knitted out of habit, out of breath, out of season. The wool carried the scent of smoke, the touch of her hands, even a trace of seal oil from the kitchen table. When she reached the sleeve, you asked, "When did you learn to knit?" She answered, "When I was your age." Back then, winters were harsher. Every time I messed up a stitch, my mother would tap my head and say, "One wrong stitch, and the wind will find it." You laughed, but she continued softer now. "But I remember, when my mother knitted my first sweater, her hands trembled. Because of the cold, and because she feared I was growing too fast." You went quiet. Then you looked at the yarn again. It wasn't just grayish-brown, it wasn't just windproof. It was a thread that stretched across generations of women who'd kept this village warm with their hands. Your mother, too, was sewing in the corner. A little girl sat next to her, learning to guide the needle, and in that quiet moment, you saw clearly, winter wasn't survived just with firewood, soup, and wool. It was carried, stitch by stitch, by patient hands weaving strength into every thread. Some sweaters in the village had been passed down for 3 generations. A patch here, an extra layer there. Let out when someone grows, tightened when lent to a child, and each thread held a story. Someone who wore it, slipped while skating, hid a piece of bread in the pocket, or hugged someone when the wind howled. You suddenly remembered the scarf you wore had once belonged to your grandfather. It was worn thin, but still smelled faintly of mint. You didn't want to wash it, because every time you wrapped it around your neck, it felt like he was still beside you, quiet, like a tiny flame. Your grandmother paused. She handed you the sweater. It wasn't finished, just the body and one sleeve. But she said, "Try it on. Let's see if the wind finds a way in." You slipped it over your head. It was rough. The wool was scratchy. The collar was missing. But it felt like an embrace from someone who'd survived 100 winters. You didn't need a mirror. You already knew this was a sweater that could block the wind. And maybe, just maybe, the deepest cold in your heart too. That morning, you woke up and saw nothing. Not no one talking, not nothing to do. But honestly, you saw nothing except snow. The windows were white. The doorway is white. Even the little god statue on your nightstand was wearing a snow hat, blown in through a crack you still hadn't patched. You tried to open the door and found a wall of snow up to your shoulders. Soft, dense, cold, and rather rude. It felt like winter had stopped waiting for you to come outside and decided to visit inside instead. You heard your grandfather mutter, "Snow's piled past the roof again." Your mother said, "Good, no fields today, no slipping, no more missing gloves." But that also meant the village had disappeared. You couldn't see the neighbor's house, couldn't see the chicken coop, couldn't see the crooked apple tree in the yard. Just one endless silent white, like someone had draped a giant blanket over the world to make everyone sleep a little longer. And strangely enough, the Vikings were happy about it, because this was the rarest kind of day, a legally mandated full-body rest day. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, which meant time to play, and play properly. Your grandfather announced a mission to locate the honey mead jug lost last winter. Of course, it was under the bed, next to some old socks, a blunt knife, and 3 very special rocks you once picked up for reasons you'd forgotten. Your mother pulled out a game made from carved sheep bones, some folkboard game whose rules changed every winter, and the winner was always the one who remembered last year's version best. Your grandmother opened her bag of dried seeds and challenged you to identify them by smell. "This one's dill." You sniffed. "Smells like damp dirt." She nodded. "Then it's dill." Your little brother sat scratching at the snow from the inside out, carving a glove window. You looked through his handiwork and saw more snow, but at least it was snow seen through someone's effort. Lunch was clean out the cupboard soup, made of shriveled carrots, dried herbs, a few breadcrumbs, and something that used to be a root. But eaten in a circle around the fire, backs pressed to the hearth, feet tangled together, spoons clinking, even a hollow root felt delicious. By afternoon, you heard a knock just when you thought you might go mad from seeing nothing but white. You opened the door and froze. It was your neighbor, wearing a hat as big as a bread loaf, covered in snow from head to toe, holding a jug of mead. "Anyone got space by the fire?" He grinned. Everyone laughed and pulled him in. Grandma said, "Next time, there's a password." He replied, "I know it. It's, 'Does the soup have fish today?'" And so the night passed with quiet talk, soft purring, fire popping, and the gentle reminder that snow might bury the world, but it can't bury laughter. That night, you fell asleep feeling soft as a feather blanket. Not because the house was warm, but because you felt like you were wrapped inside a white cocoon, woven from kindness. And before you drifted off, you thought, snow may cover the world, but if there's light in your heart, you'll still see one another. That night, you slept deeply, so deeply that you didn't dream. Or maybe you did, but only of things so light they left no footprints in your memory. Only when you opened your eyes in the middle of the night, for no apparent reason, did you sense something was happening. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the cat climbing onto your belly. It was something quieter. You looked around. The hearth still flickered, its red glow dancing across the ceiling like little sparks floating upward. Everyone was asleep. Your mother shifted gently. Your grandfather tilted his head, mouth slightly open, as if he were snoring in thought. Your grandmother's hand still rested on her feather-stuffed pillow, her chest rising and falling like small waves on snowy shores. But the air felt different, heavier, deeper. Still, you sat up and quietly stepped out to the porch. The wind had stopped. Snow fell steadily, each flake suspended in space like it had forgotten how to land. The sky was black, not the black of fear, but the black of secrets. You looked up and saw the northern lights. A wavering ribbon of green and violet shimmered above you, like the scarf of the goddess Frigg dancing in the wind. No music, no narration, just beauty so raw it left you silent. You remembered what your grandfather once said. Whenever the gods want to see how humans survive the winter, they don't ride horses. They don't knock. They just drift across the sky, quiet as breath. You sat down on the doorstep, leaning back against the door. Your fur hood hugged your ears. You held a wooden cup still laced with the last of yesterday's mead. You took a sip, not to drink, but to remember, because that's what winter nights are. No grand gestures, no noise. Just one glance at the sky, one breath out, and one whispered reminder, I'm still here, After a while, you got up and stepped back inside. The cat had taken your spot and was now staring at you like it had been saving the seat for a fee. You didn't reclaim it. You lay closer to the hearth, pulling the hide blanket to your chin. And just before you closed your eyes, you wondered, tonight, will someone drift through my dreams? A stranger, an ancestor long gone, or just me, warmer, calmer. And then you slept, in the heart of a long winter, in a house full of breath, under a sky where the gods passed silently overhead, leaving behind only light, and the gentle feeling that you made it through another day. And for now, that's enough. The next morning, you woke to a faint crackling sound, like someone walking softly across thick furs. You opened your eyes. The longhouse was still dark, but the light seeping through the door crack was different. No longer ashen grey, but white, bright. You rose gently and stepped toward the door, and when you opened it, the world burst into brilliance, as if someone had polished every rock, rooftop, and branch with silver. The snow had stopped falling. The air was crystal clear, so still you could hear snow crunching beneath distant footsteps. You stood there, silent, not daring to move, just listening. Crunch. It sounds like a cracker snapping in two. Someone was walking, not running and not hurrying, just steady, step by step, like spring was coming, but didn't want to wake anyone too soon. You dressed quickly, tightly wrapped your scarf and slipped onto the porch. The wind was soft now, no longer biting, your nose didn't sting, and you could actually smell damp wood, a scent you hadn't noticed since the first month of winter. Your father was shoveling snow in the yard. With each toss, a puff of white mist bloomed into the air, but his eyes looked anything but tired. He smiled and pointed. Look, the goat shed roof's back. You looked, and he was right. After days lost beneath the snow, the slanted little roof now stood like an old friend crawling out of bed. The whole village began to reappear. People were clearing paths, children laughing. An old woman wiped her window with her sleeve, muttering something about these melting flakes again. You stepped out onto the fresh snow. Crack! That sound made you shiver with joy. It was the sound of change. You kept walking, past frozen footprints, past sled marks from the festival night, past the deep boot impressions left by your neighbor's visit, still there, down to the ankle. Every footprint was a memory, every sunken patch, a story. And you realized winter wasn't just cold, dark, and still. It was a place where every trace remained. On ordinary days, footsteps vanish, but in snow, everything lingers longer, clearer, more honestly. You saw your mother's prints leading to the well, your father's looping behind the house, the cat's prints somehow all the way up to the roof. You walked beside them, not erasing, just extending, as if continuing a story your family had all been writing together. You didn't know how long the snow would last, but you understood something now. There are seasons in life when you don't have to go far. You have to rise, take one step, and leave a mark to say, I'm still here. You returned home, cheeks rosy from the breeze. Your grandmother was airing clothes by the fire. Your mother flipped the flatbread on the iron pan. The scent of flour and smouldering wood mingled like a morning song. And as you sat down, hands wrapped around your wooden cup, warmth flooding your chest more than any fire could, you thought. When footsteps echo in the snow, it's not just someone passing through. It's winter nodding gently, making space for what's next. That afternoon, for the first time in what felt like forever, sunlight slanted through the wooden window frame, stretched into the kitchen, and painted a soft golden streak across the cat's face, startling it just enough to yawn loudly, roll over, and reposition itself directly in the sunbeam, like it was vacationing at a tropical resort. You stood frozen, because sunlight. You hadn't seen golden light like that in weeks, and like some ancient Viking instinct kicking in, you shouted, "Laundry!" The whole house jumped. Your mother immediately dashed off to gather all the thick coats, damp scarves, and wool socks that had only ever gotten temporarily warm before getting damp again. Grandma pulled out a blanket that had fallen into soup last week and never quite recovered. Your father hauled the old wooden drying rack into the yard. Your little sibling ran in circles, waving a pair of underpants like a battle flag. And just like that, your yard and the whole village became an open-air museum of everything Vikings had ever worn, sniffed, or been slightly embarrassed by. Soon, every house had something on display. Wool socks that had turned a different kind of brown. Sheepskin cloaks are heavier than sacks of grain, shawls the size of tents. And something no one could quite identify, possibly a handkerchief, undershirt, or ancient sword-polishing rag. The whole village began to smell, not of perfume, but in the way that makes you think, linen finally got to breathe. The scent of sunshine settled into the fabric. No one could describe exactly what it smelled like, but you knew. It was the kind of smell that made you want to press your face into a towel and forget all responsibilities. You picked up your half-finished wool sweater, the one Grandma had been knitting for you, and hung it on a low branch. The breeze fluttered it gently. The sun warmed it fully. It billowed like a little flag of survival, saying, "The wearer of this has made it." People smiled more, laughed easier, breathed deeper. Maybe because the air didn't reek of smoke, mutton fat, and mystery for the first time in weeks. Someone brought out a mat and lay in the yard. An older woman untangled yarn under actual light. A child tilted their face skyward, mouth open, literally eating the sun. You lay back on the ground, arms behind your head, eyes following the clouds, white tufts drifting like lazy sheep across the sky. And for a brief moment, you felt winter retreating. Not in a rush, not with fanfare. But certainly. Grandma walked by, chuckling, "Don't forget to grab your clothes later. Or the cat'll nap on them." You nodded, thinking, well, if the cat does nap there, maybe it'll smell like sunshine too. As evening settled in, you gathered the laundry. The fabric was softer, the scarves smelled cleaner. The blanket still held a faint whiff of soup, but thankfully no longer of people. You carried the pile indoors like you were bringing in the first harvest of spring. And as night fell, snow still outside, cold still lingering, you slipped into your sun-dried sweater, the scent of light still clinging near the collar. You felt lighter, as if tomorrow winter would be just a little bit less sharp. If only by one warm breath, you closed your eyes and thought, we don't always need a blazing spring. Sometimes one small day of sun is enough to dry out our spirits. The next morning, you woke up to the sound of wood cracking. Not the chopping of firewood, not someone dropping a chair, but a soft, distant creak, like a tree in the forest behind the village was stretching after a long, frozen sleep. You sat up, listening. Then, crack, another sound, like the stiff joints of an older man waking after 3 months buried in snow. You smiled. The trees were stirring. You pulled on your coat and stepped outside. The snow was still there, but thin. Light spilled across the hills like runny honey. You strolled toward the forest, following the old path, now visible again, stone by familiar stone. The trees stood still, bare and lean, but something was different. The scent of damp soil, moisture is clinging to the bark, and if you pressed your ear to a fallen log, you could almost hear sap flowing. Slow and steady, like a river under thawed ice. A tiny sprout pushed up through the frost at the base of one tree. Not green, not lush, but it was a promise that the White Death was retreating, and life, as always, was keeping its word to return. You knelt and brushed away a delicate sheet of ice from the trunk. Beneath it, the bark was smooth, calm, and alive. You rested your hand there, and somehow your heartbeat felt clearer. Your grandfather once said, "When winter is ending, it's not the people who speak first, it's the trees." You stood there for a long while, listening to the forest breathe. The wind moved gently through the branches, not howling, not roaring, just whispering, like an old song no one remembers the lyrics to. You walked back to the village, carrying something no one could see, but everyone could feel. A signal. Your mother was baking bread by the hearth. Your grandmother was patching an old cushion. You said nothing, just sat down, picked picked up your wooden spoon and carved a slight curve into its handle, the first leaf of the year. Your little sibling saw and asked, "Are the trees growing back?" You didn't answer, just nodded. Not long after, your mother stepped outside, then your father, then the whole family. No one said where they were going, but everyone walked toward the woods, to look, to breathe, to listen, to be still. Your grandmother pulled a small handful of seeds from her pocket and scattered them on the ground. "For the birds," she whispered. "They'll be back soon." Your grandfather said nothing, just stood with his hand on his back like a stone pillar. But his eyes shimmered. You stood among them, and you realized this was the most important festival of winter. No banners, no mead, no dancing. Only a shared silence, a silent agreement with nature, where every living thing, people, birds, branches, exhaled together, almost done now. And that night when you went to sleep, you didn't need the hottest fire. Just the thought of that tiny sprout at the edge of the forest. It was enough to warm your heart with a spring that had already begun to bloom within. This morning, you folded your blanket. Not because anyone told you to, not because the drafts were gone, but because you felt it was time. That soft, subtle feeling, like someone whispering in your ear, "It's okay now. This season is over." You started with the small things, rolling up the fur you'd slept under every night, folding the wool sweater your grandmother had knit. I shook out the scarf that still held the scent of smoke. Everything still carried the smell of winter, burnt wood, old soup, category, sawdust, and something else, a quiet kind of pride. Your mother was putting away the seal fat. Your father was coiling the ropes they'd used to tie down doors during snowstorms. Grandmother was unpinning the heavy fur curtain that had hung for 3 months. Everyone did their usual chores, but slower now. Gentler, with something like gratitude. You noticed the whole village was doing the same. No one said winter is over, because no one dared speak too soon. But everyone had started putting things away. The neighbor took down the wind blocker from the window. A child drew a sun on the melting snow with a stick. An older woman laid out a frayed rug in front of her door, as if expecting an old friend to return at last. You looked back at the kitchen. The soup pot had been scrubbed clean. The fire still burned, but not urgently. Now it was just for comfort, for beauty, for the heart. You opened the old wooden chest and pulled out a small cloth pouch you'd stashed away last autumn. Inside were things you'd forgotten. A feather, a smooth river stone, a scrap of parchment with a wobbly drawing of a house beneath a bright sun. You exhaled, slowly, and added one more thing. A dry blade of grass had sprouted behind the house. Then you tied the pouch shut. Not to forget, but to remember, because you understood. This winter hadn't just passed through. It had stayed with you, in the cracks you'd patched, in the calluses on your hands, in the stories told and the soup shared. You stepped outside and looked around. The snow was melting in patches. The ground showed through, muddy, rough, but real. The sun was pale, like a child taking its first steps, shaky but determined. Your little sibling ran out, holding a twig, and stabbed it into the ground like planting a flag. "We won," they yelled. You laughed. "Won what?" "The winter blues." You didn't know if sadness could be beaten, but joy was sprouting, green and stubborn, from the thawing earth. That night, you slept with a thinner blanket, a smaller fire, and no one shivered. You lay on your side, hand beneath your cheek, thinking of mornings with lips blue from the cold, evenings with trembling spoonfuls of soup, laughter wrapped around the hearth like a shared scarf, and the cat always slept on whoever needed it most. You didn't want to forget, so you closed your eyes and whispered, "Thank you, winter, for not being easy. Because of you, I've learned to be gentle with myself." That morning, you heard water flowing, not from a pot, not someone washing their hands, but real water. From out there, you ran to the porch without your coat, and you didn't feel cold. Beneath the stone gutter, melted snow trickled in silver threads like strands of Freya's hair slipping through the fingers of spring. From the roof, icicles dripped rhythmically into the wooden trough. And where the grass peeked shyly through patches of snow, a small purple bud had emerged, timid, like a guest arriving early to a feast. You stood still, doing nothing, just breathing. And you realized spring hadn't knocked on the door. It had simply slipped inside, through the cracks near the hearth, pouring sunlight into wooden cups, scattering the scent of fresh earth across the yard. Your whole family seemed to feel it too. Father pulled back the door's windbreak. Mother tucked away the winter soup pot, replacing it with a basket of early forest greens. Grandmother sat in the sun, drying her hair, eyes half closed, whispering, "We're still here." Good. You and your younger brother wandered into the woods. Snow lingered only in patches. Birdsong called faintly from a distance. Deer tracks left wet imprints in the thawing ground. And suddenly you understood the quietest things from winter. They were now whispering their return. You sat beside the old tree, palm resting on its trunk. For the first time, the bark felt warm. You pulled out the unfinished wooden spoon from your pocket and carved a few more lines. But this time you added a flower. Winter hadn't taken anything from you. It had simply made you pause. So when spring arrived, you'd know how to breathe deeper, live slower, and love everything with a steadier heart. Thank you for joining me on this frozen, quiet, yet deeply warm journey, where the Vikings showed us that surviving winter doesn't take superhuman strength, just a small fire. A pot of soup was shared, a laugh before sleep, and whispered stories as the wind howls outside. If your heart feels a little warmer tonight, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a special thought, imagining someone out there, maybe in Dalat, Hanoi, or even Canada, tucked under their blanket, walking with me through an ancient night on a land covered in snow and kindness. I'll see you on the next journey, but for now, close your eyes, breathe gently, and let spring quietly drift into your dreams. Sleep well.